The wind scraped low and dry over the Dakota plains, bending the brown grass in wide, tired waves. The sky stretched out forever, pale and cracked like old bone, and for miles around, nothing moved except the faint swirls of dust and the far-off swing of a wooden gate. Vera Tilden stood alone near the edge of her family's worn-out barn, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly. Her coat didn't button anymore. She didn't bother trying. The cold bit through the thin fabric anyway, but she stayed still, staring at the horizon like it owed her an answer. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not her father, not the midwife in town, not even the man whose child she carried. Her husband, a thief who was now dead. She'd only just admitted it to herself. And now, with winter digging in and the crops long failed, Vera felt like she was shrinking under the weight of it all. She had no money, no mother, and a father who hadn't smiled since the mine took her brother 3 years ago. Life had wrung the softness out of him. Whatever comfort he used to offer had been buried with Sam in the mountain dust. Vera looked down at her boots, caked in frozen mud. She hadn't cried yet. It was like her body had locked up tight, as if letting a single tear out might snap something she couldn't repair. But inside, everything ached. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of having this child, or the thought of not having it. She hadn't planned any of it. Her husband had promised they'd build a life together, but she stopped believing in promises made in the heat of the moment long ago. Behind her, the old screen door creaked open. Her father's heavy steps came down the porch, each one slower than the last. "You coming in or planning to freeze to death out here?" he asked, his voice dry and edged with judgment. She didn't answer. He didn't wait. The doors swung shut again, leaving her alone with the wind and her thoughts. The town of Red Bluff wasn't the kind of place that forgave easily. People remembered things. A woman walking through town with a stomach that showed too early got whispers behind her back and silence to her face. They never said the words, but they didn't need to. Shame had its own language. Vera already heard it loud enough in her head. Red Bluff sat curled in a shallow valley, caught between cattle fields and pine hills that were always too quiet. In summer it smelled like horses and hay. In winter it smelled like smoke and regret. 2 streets ran through it, lined with clapboard stores and tired faces. There was a church, a saloon, and a doctor's office that shut early every Tuesday. The sheriff's station had more dust than prisoners. And somewhere at the edge of town, tucked behind a crooked fence, was the ranch where everything was about to change. But Vera didn't know that yet. Right now, she only knew that her father had noticed the way she didn't eat much. He'd said her face looked strange, paler than it used to. He'd never been one to talk much, but he was watching her now in that hard, quiet way of his. She could feel the walls closing in. In a place like this, there weren't many ways out. Women in her situation were expected to disappear for a few months, then come back empty-handed and silent. Or worse, they didn't come back at all. Her mother would have known what to do. She used to say that life would always try to take more than it gave, and you had to be just stubborn enough to keep your hands closed around what mattered. But Vera hadn't felt stubborn in a long time. She felt tired and alone. The sun dipped lower, casting long blue shadows over the frostbitten fields. Vera stepped away from the barn and made her way toward the gate. She didn't know where she was going, just that she couldn't stay still anymore. Each step felt heavier than the last. The wind pulled at her coat like it wanted to keep her there. But something inside her had started to shift, a small, quiet urge to survive. At the edge of town, on the far side of the abandoned rail line, lived a man named Corin Valthorn. Most folks just called him the rancher. He kept to himself, ran a quiet spread of land with more acres than animals, and never spoke unless he had to. Some said he used to be something else, a soldier, a lawman, maybe a killer. No one really knew. He had a look about him, the kind that made people keep their voices down when he walked past. But Vera had seen him once at the general store, holding a tin of coffee like it was the only thing in the world he trusted. Their eyes had met for half a second, and she felt something shift in her chest. He didn't look away. Now, as she reached the end of the road, the ranch sat ahead, quiet and still. She hadn't meant to come this far. She didn't know why she had. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the fact that no one ever talked about him. Like he'd removed himself from the judgment the rest of them lived under. She stopped just outside the gate, her breath visible in the cold air. Her boots crunched against the frost. She placed one hand gently on her belly. For the first time since she found out, she whispered the truth out loud. "I don't want to lose you." She didn't expect anyone to hear, but someone had. From the porch, a figure rose tall, broad, wrapped in a long coat that moved like part of the wind. Corin Valthorn watched her for a long moment, unmoving. He didn't ask what she was doing there. He didn't ask who she was. He just nodded, once, like he'd been expecting her all along. And in that moment, Vera Tilden took her first breath in days that didn't taste like fear. She didn't know how or why, but somehow she'd stumbled onto the one piece of land where a woman wasn't expected to choose between saving herself and saving her child. She stepped forward. The gate opened without a sound. The next morning came quiet and gray, sky low and the ground brittle with frost. Vera woke in the old guest room. Corin had pointed her to the night before without saying much. The bed was firm but clean, the air inside the house warmer than anything she'd felt in days. She sat up slowly, still unsure if she'd dreamed the way he looked at her, or the way he hadn't looked at her at all, just nodded like he understood something she hadn't even said. She wasn't sure what to make of it yet. By the time she made her way down the hall, drawn by the smell of fresh coffee, a young woman was already in the kitchen. She moved fast, hair wrapped in a loose braid, sleeves rolled up, and a knife in one hand as she chopped something into a pot. She didn't seem startled to see Vera. She didn't even stop working. "You're the woman from the edge of town," she said, glancing up with sharp eyes. "Heard you might be staying a while." I don't know yet." Vera looked around awkwardly. "Corin said I could rest. Just for a bit." The woman gave a soft grunt. "That sounds like him." Her name was June, and she wasn't family, not by blood anyway, she said, tossing a handful of herbs into the pot. She'd shown up 2 winters ago when her brother was killed in a land dispute west of here, and somehow found her way to Valthorn's porch the same way Vera had. She stayed because, as she put it, there's worse places to disappear. She did most of the cooking, all the stitching, and kept her ear to the ground for things that might matter. Her mouth was quick, but she wasn't cruel. Vera could feel something guarded behind her voice, though. She never asked Vera's full story, but her eyes said she already had a guess. "You ought to eat while you can," June said. "He's got a soft spot for lost women, but even Corin won't feed a ghost." There was no one else at the table, but as the day passed, more faces began to fill the ranch. Around noon, a tall, lanky man named Drace Corin rode in from the north field. His voice was friendly, full of dust and jokes, and he doffed his hat when he saw Vera. "Heard we had a visitor," he said, smiling wide. "Can't remember the last time a lady stayed longer than a meal." But something in his eyes flicked too fast from warm to curious to calculating. It made Vera sit a little straighter. Drace had worked the ranch for nearly 5 years. Said he owed Corin for pulling him out of a gunfight gone wrong down in Kansas. He was easy to talk to, easy to laugh with, and probably easier to trust than he should be. Vera could tell by the way June watched him. She spoke to him with an edge, always short, always watching. But Drace seemed to enjoy the tension, the way people knew not to get too close. Later that evening, as the wind picked up again and the smell of supper drifted out of the kitchen, Vera saw a boy no older than 12 leading 2 horses toward the barn. His name was Tom, quiet as a breeze and smaller than he should have been for his age. June said he was her cousin's son, left on the porch with nothing but a note and bruises fading on his arms. He rarely spoke above a whisper, but he worked hard and stayed close to the horses. They calmed him, maybe more than people ever could. "Don't worry about him," June said once, seeing Vera watch him through the window. "He's got his own shadows." We all do. But the most unpredictable person on that ranch wasn't Drace or June or the boy. It was Corin Valthorn himself. Vera didn't see him much that first day, but she felt his presence. He walked like the land answered to him, with the kind of stillness that made other people nervous. When he passed, animals hushed. People did too. At supper, he sat at the far end of the table, spoke only when he had to, and looked everyone straight in the eye when they did. His voice was low and rough, but not unkind. He didn't ask Vera questions. He didn't need to. His silence had a way of making people tell him what he wanted to know without asking. There was something between June and Corin, Vera noticed. Not romantic, at least not anymore, but something worn in and layered. June moved around him with a kind of practiced rhythm, like they'd seen the worst of each other and still managed to keep standing. When Corin gave her a quiet nod across the table, she returned it without words, and Vera could tell it meant more than most things spoken aloud. But not everyone on the ranch trusted Vera just yet. That night, as the fire in the hearth burned low, Drace leaned against the doorframe while Vera washed dishes. He didn't say much at first, just watched her hands, her eyes. "You from Red Bluff?" She nodded. Folks there don't usually wander this far unless they've got trouble behind them. Vera paused. "I just needed somewhere quiet." Drace gave a half smile. "That what you told him?" He tilted his head slightly toward the window, where Corin had just walked out into the barn. "I didn't tell him anything," she said. He laughed, soft and dry. "That's what I mean." There was a flicker of something in his tone, not quite teasing, not quite threat, just enough to make her nervous. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "People think Corin keeps this place standing with quiet and grit. But there's always a cost, Vera. He doesn't give out kindness unless he sees something in it for him. Just remember that." She held his gaze a second longer than she meant to. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," he said, his smile fading, "the last woman who thought she was safe here ended up with more scars than shelter." He left her with that and didn't look back. That night, Vera barely slept. She kept thinking about Corin's eyes, how calm they seemed, like they'd seen everything and stopped being surprised by pain. But she also kept hearing Drace's voice in her head, warning her that trust could be a dangerous thing out here. And June, well, June never said much, but Vera could feel the weight of things unsaid every time she walked past. Secrets lay thick on this land, buried in the dirt, in the walls, in the way people didn't quite meet each other's eyes too long. By morning, Vera was already helping June with chores, mending saddle straps and sweeping the back porch. She didn't ask for a place here, but she could feel herself carving it out anyway, piece by piece. She felt steadier with her hands busy, but her mind wandered. What did Corin want from her, really? And why had he let her stay without questions? Later that day, June finally spoke what Vera had been wondering. "He's not the kind of man who saves people for no reason." Vera looked up. "So why let me stay?" June shrugged. "Maybe he sees something in you. Or maybe," she paused, eyes narrowing, "he sees someone." The words echoed strange in Vera's chest. As the days passed, more moments like that appeared. Glimpses, shifts in tone. An old letter tucked in June's sewing box with a name scratched out. The way Tom flinched when someone knocked too loud on the door. The way Corin's hand curled tight when the wind carried the sound of distant gunshots from the neighboring ridge. Nothing was said directly, but Vera was learning that people on this ranch carried their pain like second skins, worn, quiet, and always ready to be hidden again. And underneath it all, something else stirred. She wasn't the only one with something to lose. The frost held longer that week. Morning stayed white, and the wind picked up across the ridgeline like it was searching for something. Vera started waking before dawn, her hands raw from helping June, her belly growing heavier by the day. Though Corin never asked her to earn her keep, she couldn't bear sitting still. She swept the floors, mended feed sacks, and tried to ignore the way Tom winced when doors slammed, or how June always checked the locks twice after nightfall. The air on the ranch had changed. Something felt closer, tighter. And Vera couldn't say what had shifted, only that it had. June didn't speak for a long time after, just stared at the dust settling where the horse had been. That man used to wear a uniform, she muttered finally. Last time he showed up, 2 people disappeared by morning. Vera stared at her. Who? Doesn't matter now, June said. Just don't go asking questions you don't want the answers to. That night, Vera lay in bed listening to the creak of floorboards overhead. Someone was pacing. Maybe Corin. Maybe Drace. She wondered what that rider had said. What kind of history Corin had out there. What kind of future was catching up. The tension broke open 3 days later. Vera had gone to the barn to check on the lambs. One of the ewes was due to birth early, and Tom had been keeping an eye on her. When she stepped inside, she froze. Drace was leaning against the far stall, a bottle in his hand, his face red and unfocused. I was just thinking, he slurred, tapping the bottle on the stall door, how strange it is that you show up, no questions asked, and suddenly Valdhorn's locking his damn papers away. I don't know what you're talking about, Vera said, stepping back toward the door. Oh, I think you do. His smile was jagged now. You don't ask for a thing, do all the right chores, bat those pretty eyes. Makes a man wonder what it is you're really after. I'm not after anything. That's so. He stepped forward. 'Cause I saw you watching. Watching him. Watching me. Like you're waiting. I was just looking for somewhere safe. He laughed, but it was bitter now. Safe? Ain't no such thing out here. You should have learned that before crawling into some stranger's bunkhouse. I haven't touched Corin, she snapped, something hard her chest rising. He offered me a place to stay, that's all. Drace tilted his head, the bottle slipping a little in his hand. Is that what you think this is? Kindness. Before she could respond, the barn door slammed open. Corin stood there, his jaw tight, eyes dark with something Vera hadn't seen before. You drunk on my land? He asked quietly. Drace turned, lifting his hands lazily. Just having a talk with your guest. That wasn't a talk, Corin said. And she's not your concern. Drace scoffed. No, I guess she's yours now. Another mouth to feed. Another secret to hold. Corin stepped closer. You want to stay here, you clean up, and keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, you ride out now. I won't ask again. For a moment, Vera thought Drace would push back. His hands clenched, the bottle now forgotten on the ground. But something in Corin's eyes, calm, deadly, made him pause. With a muttered curse, Drace shoved past them and disappeared into the dusk. Later, Corin found Vera sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around herself. He didn't sit beside her, just stood near the railing, hands as coat pockets. I should have stopped that sooner, he said. You didn't know. I did. He's been close to cracking for weeks. He's a good worker, but I kept him on too long. Vera looked up at him. What's he really talking about? He said you were hiding something. Corin was quiet for a long time. Then, everyone's hiding something. That's not a crime. Is it the law? His eyes met hers, and for once, something unguarded flickered across his face. No, not anymore. She didn't push further. Not then. But she knew. The way he watched the horizon. The way he kept papers locked away. The way June guarded every expression when Corin's name was brought up. There were layers here she hadn't seen yet. The next morning, Drace was gone. His bunk empty, his horse taken. No note. No warning. June found a broken bottle in the stable and quietly cleaned the mess without a word. Corin didn't mention it. Tom wouldn't even look at anyone that day. But the calm didn't last. 4 nights later, the same rider returned. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 more men rode behind him. They didn't come to talk. They came to search. Vera watched from the parlor window as the 3 dismounted, faces hard, hands near their holsters. Corin met them in the yard, calm as always. We've got reason to believe one of your ranch hands has ties to a fugitive out of Nebraska, the lead man said. Woman. Pregnant. Vera's stomach twisted. She stepped back from the window. Corin didn't even blink. I've got 3 people working here. None of them match that. She has dark hair. Said to be traveling under a false name. Left town after a doctor reported she refused termination. Corin crossed his arms. You come with proof, or you leave. The man pulled a paper from his coat. A drawing. Vera couldn't see the details, but she felt the cold rise in her chest. It was her. Not a photograph, but close enough. Close enough that any man with eyes would guess it. June stepped in the room then, fast and quiet. You need to go. Out the back. I can't run, Vera whispered. I didn't do anything wrong. June grabbed her hand. They don't care. That's not what this is about. What is it about? June stared at her. Politics. Doctors with influence. Men who want women to stay in their place. It ain't justice. It's ownership. Vera's hand shook. Corin will lie for me. June didn't answer. Outside, voices rose. Then gunfire split the air. Vera ducked, heart hammering. Tom screamed somewhere across the house. She bolted through the hallway, June behind her. Out the back door, through the cold, into the dark. Smoke curled from the barn. One of the men had set fire to it. Vera watched the glow rise like the world was splitting open. She wanted to go back. She wanted to run in and help. But June yanked her forward. They'll kill you if you stay. They ran. Through the trees, breath white in the air. Vera stumbled, nearly fell. June caught her. They made it to the ravine before stopping. Below, the creek was frozen and low. Vera dropped to her knees, gasping. What if he's dead? June crouched beside her. He's not. How do you know? Because he's done worse things than lie to the law. He knows how to disappear. The fire glowed behind them, orange against the dark sky. Vera's hands trembled. In the silence, June finally said what Vera had feared. You're not just running from the law, Vera. You're running from men who think they get to decide what lives. They want you to choose between your baby and your future. Vera nodded slowly. I already did. June looked at her. Then we find a way to survive it. And for the first time, Vera realized she wasn't running alone. The ranch was burning, but something inside her had started to grow stronger than the flames. The morning after the fire, the land looked wounded. Smoke still curled from the blackened ribs of the barn, now half collapsed and charred. The frost was gone, replaced by ash and churned earth. Vera and June crept back through the trees cautiously, hearts heavy and unsure of what they'd find. There was no sign of the lawmen, no sign of Corin. The yard was quiet, too quiet, like the air was waiting for something to fall. They crossed the back fence and found Tom in the kitchen, curled up in the corner with soot on his face and dried blood on his knuckles. He didn't speak when Vera knelt beside him, only clung to her like a child much younger than 12. Vera held him tight, her heart breaking quietly in her chest. She knew that kind of fear. She'd grown up with it, too. June checked the front door, then the porch, then the surrounding fields. Corin was gone. His horse, too. It wasn't like him. He never ran, never left his land unguarded. June came back in and locked every door. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes were distant, darting to the window over and over. He'll be back, she said, more to herself than to Vera. He wouldn't leave us like this. But Vera wasn't so sure. Something had cracked open in Corin the moment those lawmen arrived. Not fear. Corin didn't scare easily, but something deeper. Recognition, like he knew this was always coming. He'd just been hoping for more time. By evening, June had patched what she could. She boarded the broken windows, rationed what little food remained, and set Tom up in the storage room, safest spot in the house. Vera tried to help, but her body was slowing now. She was far along, maybe 8 months, maybe more. It was hard to know. The baby kicked strong, like it knew the world it was coming into was already burning. That night, Vera stood by the ashes of the barn and let the cold bite through her coat. She thought about what it meant to bring a child into this life. This land full of lawmen with twisted motives, ranches set on fire, men like Drace who acted friendly until they weren't. She thought about her father, who once told her, you don't get to want things. You get to survive. She believed him for years. Until now. Now, she wanted something more. The next day, Corin returned. His face was bruised, blood crusted on his sleeve, and he was walking with a limp. June ran to him first, arms thrown around him in a way Vera hadn't seen before. He winced but didn't push her away. Tom peeked from the doorway, then bolted out and clung to his coat. It took Corin a long moment to speak. "They took Drace," he said finally, voice rough. "Dragged him to Black Hollow. Sheriff's holding him for questioning. Says he confessed that someone here's been harboring fugitives." Vera stepped forward. "He gave them my name?" "No, not yet. But he will. Soon." June swore under her breath and pulled Corin toward the porch. Vera followed. The sky was turning purple, and the wind smelled like something bitter. "They'll come back, won't they?" she asked. Corin nodded. "With more men. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe sooner." The weight in Vera's chest settled heavier. "Then we can't stay." "No," Corin said, meeting her eyes. "You can't." She flinched. "You're sending me away?" "I'm sending you somewhere safe." "You said I was safe here." "You were." His voice rose just slightly. "Before Drace opened his mouth. Before the law knew what I was hiding. Before this ranch became a target." Vera stepped back, heart hammering. "So you're choosing survival over me, too." He stared at her, jaw clenched. "I'm trying to keep you alive." "And what about you?" Corin looked away. "Doesn't matter." June watched them both, her face hard. "You're both being stupid," she muttered. "You think this is about one woman and one baby? This is about power, about men in town deciding who gets to keep their bodies and who doesn't. Vera's not the only one they're after. There's more women like her. This is just the start." Corin sat down heavily on the porch steps. "There's a wagon ready in the shed. I hid it before they came. It's stocked. I can get you halfway to Colorado before they even notice you're gone." Vera turned to June. "Are you coming with me?" June hesitated. "No, I've got work to do here. Women like us need someone holding ground." Vera's throat burned. "I don't want to run." "You're not running," June said softly. "You're protecting." The next few hours passed in a blur. They packed in silence. Vera folded the few things she owned, wrapped up her mother's necklace, and kissed Tom on the forehead. She promised him they'd meet again. He nodded but didn't smile. He was too used to goodbyes. As the wagon rolled through the backwoods under cover of darkness, Vera sat beside Corin, heart pounding with every jolt of the wheels. They didn't speak much, but just before dawn, as the sky began to soften with light, she reached for his hand. "I'm not a secret," she said quietly. "Not anymore." He looked at her then, tired and worn, and still beautiful in a way only pain could shape. "No," he said, "you're a revolution." They stopped near a canyon ridge, where an old shack marked the start of the path into Colorado. Corin helped her down, eyes scanning the horizon. "You'll be safe past that pass," he said. "There's a woman named Mrs. Dawes. She's helped others. She knows what to do. And you." "I'm going back. To fight. To finish what Drace started." Vera stepped closer, tears rising. "You don't have to do this alone." "Yes," he said softly, brushing her cheek. "I do." She kissed him then, not like in stories, not desperate or breathless, just real. Solid. Like they were saying everything they hadn't said yet. When she pulled away, he was already turning toward his horse. As she watched him ride off, Vera felt her heart split in two. One half holding the weight of everything she'd lost, the other carrying the quiet, stubborn hope of everything she still had. By the time she reached Mrs. Dawes' house, her contractions had already started, and the war Corin was riding into had already begun. The sky turned to slate as the storm rolled over Red Bluff. Thunder echoed low in the hills, steady and sharp like distant rifle shots. Corin Valthorn rode hard through the back trails, rain beginning to mist through his coat, the weight of what he had to do dragging in every stride of his horse. There was no more pretending. Drace had talked. The law knew. And Corin, he was no longer a man keeping a quiet ranch. He was a man standing between a corrupt system and the woman he should have saved long ago. Back at the ranch, June stood at the edge of the porch with Tom beside her, his small hand gripping her coat. They both heard the hoofbeats before they saw anything. When Corin came into view, soaked and stiff, June didn't ask what happened. She could already see it in his eyes. "They've posted Vera's name on a warrant board," Corin said, voice low. 5 towns, 5 counties, wanted for resisting medical mandate. Falsely listed under obstruction and interference. "She's gone," June replied. "Safe, or as safe as she can be. They'll still come here, looking for the rest of us." June nodded once, then let them come. But it wasn't just the law that Corin feared. It was the reason behind it. When Vera's case first reached the county office, it should have been dismissed. Just another young woman making her own choices. But someone had kept it alive. A name he hadn't expected to resurface. Dr. Lambert, the same man who had come years ago to offer solutions to June when her cousin's baby was born wrong and bruised. The same man who once told Corin, "The frontier needs control, not emotion." Now, that man was behind this mess, feeding whispers, pulling strings. So Corin rode to Black Hollow. The jail there sat crooked on a hill, its wooden boards warped with time, but the iron bars still strong. Inside, Drace paced. When he saw Corin, he laughed. "I wondered when you'd come," he said. "Figured you'd try and bury this like you bury the rest." Corin stepped inside the holding room slowly. "You talked." "Of course I talked. They said they'd hang me otherwise. Told me all I had to do was hand over a name. So I did. Gave them hers. Gave them yours, too." Corin's jaw worked, but he kept still. "What did Lambert promise you?" Drace shrugged. "Freedom. Money. Land. Maybe a town to run once they push you out. You always were a coward." "Maybe," Drace said, leaning closer to the bars. "But I survive." There was a moment of stillness, thin, thick and tight. Corin leaned in. "You told them Vera was carrying my child." Drace smiled. "Let them believe what they want. It makes it easier to burn you." Corin turned without another word. As he left the jail, his hands shook, not from fear but fury. They were coming for Vera, not because of the law, but because someone powerful wanted to make an example. And now that Lambert believed the child might be Corin's, it was personal. Across the pass, Vera lay curled on the wooden floor of Mrs. Dawes' cabin, sweat slick on her skin, the baby coming faster than she was ready for. Mrs. Dawes, an old widow with sharp hands and a voice that could cut stone, moved quickly, boiling water, ripping cloth, whispering prayers under her breath. Vera gripped the edge of the bed frame, teeth clenched against a scream. "They'll find me," she whispered. "They won't," Mrs. Dawes snapped. "Not before this child does." The pain came in waves, sharp and ruthless. Vera had imagined this moment so many times, holding her child, whispering promises. But she'd never imagined doing alone. She'd never imagined pushing a life into the world while fearing who might kick the door down at any moment. Back in Red Bluff, June was preparing. She'd gathered names. Other women like Vera, women the law had shamed into silence. Mothers who'd lost babies to doctors with cold hands and colder hearts. They began to arrive at the ranch one by one. Word spread that June and Corin were standing up. And for every man like Drace, there were 3 women who had nothing left to lose. The storm kept on as Corin returned home, his coat streaked with mud, his eyes darker than June had ever seen. "He's turned her into a symbol," he said quietly. "He wants her burned for standing." June looked at the women huddled in the parlor. "Then we let her stand." "But what if they find her?" June met his eyes. "Then they'll have to go through us." Hours later, they did. Sheriff Cole, pushed by Dr. Lambert, rode in with 6 men and 2 wagons. Lanterns swayed in the wind, guns drawn. They didn't knock. They called out, "Bring us Vera Tilden and the child." Now, June stepped onto the porch. "She's not here." Lambert rode forward. "Then where is she?" "Gone." "To where?" "Somewhere you don't get to touch." The sheriff shifted in his saddle. "We have orders. And I have land rights," June snapped. "Step 1 foot past that fence, and I'll have a dozen witnesses saying you trespassed with deadly intent." The women inside were armed. Not with guns, though some had those too, but with stories. With records. With scars. They had names of daughters who'd bled alone after forced procedures. Names of sisters locked away in asylums for refusing to surrender their children. Vera was not the first. She was just the one they decided to fight for. Corin stepped beside June then, shotgun in his hands. "She's not coming back here," he said to Lambert. "You want to burn someone, you're looking at the wrong house." The standoff lasted an hour. In the end, the sheriff pulled back. Lambert, furious, warned he would return with the judge. But something had changed in town. Women began speaking. Talking loud. Letters were sent. Doctors questioned. And slowly, the tide began to turn. 3 days later, a messenger arrived at Mrs. Dawes' cabin. Vera, cradling her newborn girl in her arms, read the letter in silence. "They stood for you. Now you have to stand, too." She didn't wait. With Mrs. Dawes' help, she dressed, bundled her daughter, and began to ride back. When she arrived at the ranch, the entire town was waiting. Some faces were cold, others uncertain. But many, so many, were lit with quiet fire. Vera stepped from the wagon slowly, her child pressed to her chest. Corin came forward, looking older than when she left, but whole. He said nothing, just reached for her hand. Then she turned to the crowd and told her story. All of it. What they tried to make her do. What she refused. What they threatened her with. What she endured. She named Lambert. Named the sheriff. Named Drace. And then she named herself. "I am Vera Tilden," she said, voice steady. "And I chose to live. For me. For her." There was silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then more. And in that moment, something cracked wide open in Red Bluff. Not tragedy, not redemption, but truth. A truth that had waited far too long to be spoken. Spring arrived quiet and slow. The frost finally breaking. Soft green pushing up through old black soil. The ranch was still standing. The barn had been rebuilt, stronger than before, with fresh planks that smelled like pine and sweat. Horses paced the corral again, and the fields, once scarred by fire and hoof prints, began to heal in patches. But what had changed most wasn't the land, it was the people. Vera lived in the guest house now, though no one called it that anymore. It was hers. A cradle sat near the window, and in it, her daughter, Hope Tilden, named after the promise of a new life, slept with her hands curled beneath her chin. Every morning, Vera woke before the sun to feed her, wrap her in a soft blue shawl, and walk the edge of the fence line. She didn't hide anymore. She didn't whisper. And when people from town passed the gate, they nodded at her with quiet respect. It didn't happen all at once. 4 weeks after her speech, Red Bluff had teetered on the edge of change. Some folks left anonymous letters in the chapel, angry and shaking. Some spat near her boots when she went into town. But others, women, mostly, came to her porch in the evenings, sat with her, listened, talked, told their own stories, some whispering for the first time about choices made in secret. Vera didn't try to fix anything. She just listened, and that, somehow, was more powerful than anything else. Cor never said much about the night he stood down sheriff. He didn't have to. The way he worked the land now, with more patience, more presence, told Vera everything she needed to know. He still didn't sleep much, still watched the horizon like he expected something bad to return. But when Hope cried in the night, he was often the first to her cradle, cradling her in strong arms, whispering to her in a voice Vera had never heard from him before. Gentle, afraid, full of something like hope. June stayed, of course. She took over the house like it belonged to her, which in many ways it did. The women who came to the ranch looking for help were met first by her sharp voice and her soft hands. She organized everything: food, beds, rides to safe counties. She wrote letters, kept records, remembered every name. But it was June's eyes that held the real story. She didn't talk much about her past. Didn't need to. Her work spoke for her. And one night, As Vera handed her a bowl of soup, she finally said, "We didn't change the whole world, but we changed this one." The sheriff never returned. Word got around that he was being investigated, that Dr. Lambert had quietly closed his practice and moved east under a new name. Justice didn't come with sirens or trials. It came slow, quiet, like snow melting into creek water, like people choosing not to look away anymore. Vera's father never came looking for her. She thought about that sometimes, whether he ever found out what she'd done, what she'd become. A mother, a leader, a woman who had been told to choose and chose both. She didn't miss him, not exactly, but sometimes she stood in the fields and imagined telling him that she wasn't ruined, that she hadn't broken, that she'd grown something out of the very thing he told her would destroy her. She wrote her daughter letters, small ones, folded into a box under her bed. Each one was written in the early morning before the ranch woke, telling hope about the kind of world she came into. Not just the cruelty, but the courage too, about the fire and the silence that followed, about Corin and how he taught Vera that silence didn't always mean absence, about June and how sometimes the loudest voices were the ones that never had a shout, and about herself, about the woman who stood at the edge of a barn, cold and scared, and chose to walk towards something she didn't yet understand. Not because she was brave, but because she couldn't bear to disappear. One evening, near Hope's first birthday, Vera and Corin sat on the porch as dusk fell soft over the hills. Fireflies blinked near the grass, and Tom, taller now, surer, read aloud from a book June had given him. His voice carried across the yard, uncertain but growing stronger with each line. Vera looked at Corin, who watched the boy with quiet pride. "Do you ever think," she asked, "about who you were before this?" Corin took a long breath. "All the time, but I don't stay there." She nodded. "Me neither." He glanced at her then, his face lit by the lantern glow. "You save yourself, Vera." She didn't reply right away. She watched Hope sleeping in the cradle beside her, chest rising and falling like slow breath. "No," she said softly. "I was just finally seen." The porch creaked as June stepped out, a blanket in one hand. "Come inside. It's going to rain." And it did, just as they reached the door. The sky opened up gently, not in anger, but like a long-awaited relief. Vera turned back once more before going inside, letting the cool drops touch her face. The past didn't vanish. It just softened. In the end, there was no parade, no grand reward, just peace. And for people like Vera, peace was louder than applause. She didn't need the world to cheer her name. She just needed her daughter to grow up knowing that her life had never been a mistake, that her existence had never required a sacrifice, that her mother had been told she couldn't have both, but had chosen to anyway, and won.